ईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ 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 ईश्वराय विद्महे सत्यदेवाय धीमहि तन्नः सर्वः प्रचोदयात्।
Chapter 7. The All-Powerful Creator, Preserver, Destroyer. I am the Atma, the dwells in all living beings. Chapter 7. The All-Powerful. I am the Atma that dwells in all living beings. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all things. All that you see in the cosmos, the moving and the stationary objects, is a manifestation of the Atma, Baba. Creation, Srishti. To alter a living being into a non-living entity and vice versa is one of the sportive gestures, leelas, of God, as demonstrated several times by Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba, and becomes beads. On the holy occasions of Fridays in the month of Shravan, married Hindu women customarily perform Gauri Puja, worship of Goddess Parvati. A Hindu couple wished to avail of one such occasion to worship also the lotus feet Pada Puja of Swami. They requested Swami for permission, which he readily granted. They then gathered all the materials needed, but they could not get hold of black beads, which are essential for the puja. At the appointed hour, Swami arrived and took his seat. In their excitement, the couple totally overlooked the absence of the all-important beads and commenced the ceremony. Suddenly, a big black ant crawled out of a flower offered at Swami's feet. Swami smiled indulgently and commented, "What? Are you worshipping me with black ants?" And he picked up the crawling insect and placed it in the lady's hand. To their wonderment, the ant suddenly changed into 2 black beads, so the only thing wanting for due performance of the worship reached their hand after all. The grateful devotees were astonished at Swami's ability to create by his mere will. The lady was immensely pleased that Baba enabled her to complete the ceremony satisfactorily in accordance with the prescribed procedure. In this instance, Baba altered a living object into a non-living object without taking away life. But there is another beautiful episode where he changed a lifeless object into a living being. Parrot from beetle leaves. Swami at the time was touring Andhra Pradesh. He was staying in a devotee's house. After meals, a silver plate containing tender beetle leaves, areca nut powder, lime and other ingredients were placed before him. He leisurely removed the ribs from the leaves as he prepared the latter for eating, and he carefully arranged the ribs in the plate in the shape of a parrot. He was all the while talking with devotees gathered around him, and he suddenly asked them a question: "What do you think God is busy with?" They answered, "Srishti is what God is busy with." Swami promptly touched the parrot's form on the plate in front of him. It suddenly came to life and flew out vigorously, beating its wings. The devotees were astonished at the wonderful sight. Joining in the general merriment, Swami too laughed enchantingly. Diamond ear-tops in cookie. Indulal Shah once visited Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba, invited Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba to dinner in his house in Bombay, now known as Mumbai. Swami was seated on one side of the dining table. Opposite him sat Shah and his daughter. Mrs. Shah brought a plate of freshly cooked hot vadas, a savory cookie made with soaked black gram paste deep fried in oil, and placed it before Swami. He picked up one of them and placed it on the plate of Shah's daughter and told her to break it into 2 before eating. When she did so, she found a diamond-studded ear-top in each piece. All of them were thrilled. Swami himself put one each in the girl's ears. It was Kodaikanal in the 4th week of April in 1997. Several devotees were dining with Swami. Swami finished his meal and was going around the devotees talking to them in the dining hall. He went near a devotee and said, "Break the puris," a puffed and deep-fried naan-like dish, "before you eat." The person did as suggested by Swami and found to his surprise a golden ring. Swami said, "That's for you, have it." Everyone was pleasantly surprised. Anil Kumar was also there eating puris. Swami asked him to eat fast. Anil Kumar said, "Swami, who knows what you have put in which puri?" He further added, "So I am checking every puri and I'm eating carefully." Everyone had a hearty laugh at Anil Kumar's words. In every such event, it is not what has been created out of what. It is Swami's will that matters. That alone is the central factor, the cause as well as the effect. Swami once declared, "What I will happens, what I order materializes." Maintenance, sthiti. On one occasion in Threi, Swami's residence in Vrindavan, Swami invited Brigadier S.K. Bose to address the assembled students and staff. The Brigadier spoke mostly about the lessons he had learnt at the lotus feet of Swami, concluded his talk and approached Swami to touch his feet. Swami did not allow him to do so, but asked him, "Why did you make no mention of what happened on the Dasera day?" Brigadier Bose replied, "Swami, what should I say about it? I am merely an instrument in your sublime hands. I do not have any individuality of my own. I can never forget that you restored me to life that day. I am ever grateful to you, Swami. I cannot describe my indebtedness adequately in words." After that, Swami granted him the privilege of touching his feet. As Brigadier Bose slowly moved back to his seat, Swami told members of the staff that day Bose was indeed dead. I brought him back to life. He has still plenty to do for me. 2 months earlier, Swami had entrusted to Bose the work of laying a 12 feet wide concrete strip around the mandir. He also directed that it should be completed before the beginning of the Dasera festivals. The job took 25 days at the rate of 12 hours of daily labor. Many a devotee participated in the labor of love and devotion. After finishing the job on time, Bose attended every evening discourse that Swami delivers customarily during the Dasera celebrations, spread over 10 days. On the final day, Vijayadashami, Thursday the 20th October 1988, he was suffering from high temperature. Nevertheless, he made his labored way to the Purnachandra auditorium and sat in a chair close to the dais. Swami commenced his discourse. Meanwhile, Bose began feeling loss of breath. Suddenly, he collapsed in his chair. But strangely, even though his eyes were closed, he was aware of what was happening around him. He saw a huge golden-colored bird standing there and looking at Bose with eyes full of pity. Bose could not imagine how a bird so big could make its way into the auditorium, but he saw that Swami raised both his hands and waved them as if he was driving the bird away, and it just disappeared. In the course of his discourse, Swami was reciting a verse. He came down from the dais. He seemed to be holding something in his closed right fist. As he lifted up Bose by the shoulder with his left hand, Swami patted the back of Bose's head with the right hand. Probably he was holding Bose's life in his right fist while patting on the back side of his head inducted life back into his body. Bose opened his eyes. He was surprised to see Swami standing close at hand just by his side, that too on the holy Vijayadashami. Wanting to touch Swami's feet, he extended his hand. Swami told him to get up and stand, but Bose continued to sit offering salutations to him. Swami patted on his back to give him strength. He told him, "Stand up, come on, come to the dais and take your seat near the door." Bose obeyed. Then Swami resumed his interrupted discourse and went on speaking for a full hour. The lifeless face of Bose steadily and gradually acquired the glow of life within that hour. About 2 months later, the sports day was being celebrated in the Hillview Stadium. At the outset, Swami hoisted the games flag. Bose was present there and was thrilled to see on the flag the image of the celestial bird, Garuda, the vehicle of Lord Sri Mahavishnu. Bose remembered that it was the same bird that had sat over him on the Vijayadashami day with its eyes full of pity for him. Bose came to know much later that according to the Garuda Puran, it is Garuda that carries saintly souls to heaven, Brahmaloka. Brigadier Bose was referring to this episode when he humbly pleaded with Swami that Bhagawan had restored him to life and that it was beyond him to find words to describe his gratitude to him.
Do I stop? Do I start?
Start.
Okay. Just okay. You are embodiment of Atma. Baba once elucidated the nature of Atma and its relationship with the constituents of the physical body, like limbs, organs, senses, mind, intellect, etc. The essence of what he said is briefly given below. Mind, manas, consciousness, chitta, and awareness, senses, indriyas, all these join together to give full shape to the body. But Atma is not the combination of all these things. There is Atma in the body, there is Atma in the mind, and there is Atma in the consciousness and the senses. All these function under the direction of the Atma. This can be illustrated by a simple analogy. A car has a steering, clutch, brakes, and several other parts. does each of them function by itself? When one travels by car, does the horn blow on its own? Does the steering move by itself? Obviously not. There's a driver behind all of these. Likewise, body is the vehicle and Atma the driver. That driver makes the eyes see, ears hear, and mouth speak. It is only as long as the driver is present that the various parts perform their allotted functions. Once the driver abandons the body, the very same eyes can no longer see, and the same ears cannot hear. The same hands can do nothing, and the same mouth can talk no more. All the organs and parts become non-functional. Earlier, all these were made to work, to function by a master, the Atma. As long as the master remains in it, this body is Sivam, divine and auspicious. When he leaves it, it is but Savam, corpse. If we deeply ponder over our true identity, as Swami repeatedly suggests, we will soon realize that we are but embodiments of the inner self, Atma, and that the parts, organs, and other constituents of this earthly body are merely instruments, and by no means that inner self. The similar incident. Here is yet another instance of the suprahuman divine power of Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Once, Sri Sathya Sai went to Simla along with some of his devotees. Swami Karanayanda too was in the group. That trip saw an unbelievable event. It was about evening when the party arrived at their lodgings in Simla. About 6:30 p.m., as darkness approached, a 2-year-old boy died in the house in the town. The parents were grief-stricken. Seeing their agony, a friend advised them, Sri Sathya Sai Baba is now in town. Take your son's dead body there, place him at his feet and beg for mercy. The distraught parents wrapped the dead body in a piece of cloth and took it to Baba. Heartbroken with grief, the mother laid the dead child at Baba's feet and wailed, Swami, please bring him back to life. Wake him up to life. As the poor woman was crying, the ever-merciful Bhagavan cast a compassionate look at the dead body. The boy came back to life and began crying. The tears of grief and desperation of the parents turned to tears of joy. They washed the lotus feet of Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai with their copious tears. The devotees too were overjoyed and immensely moved at this miraculous happening and hailed the glory of Bhagavan with resounding cries of Jai Sai Ram, Jai Sai Ram. Ultimate disillusion, Layam. Karanam Subama was a blessed soul who cared for Swami when he was a child and was known as Satyam and loved him as if he were her own son. As the ever-swelling crowds of devotees arrived to have his darshan, the lady cooked meals and fed them. Through endless service to Swami and his devotees, she used to feel that her life's mission was fulfilled. With Prashanti Nilayam being built for Swami, told her one day that she would live for only one more year. Though somewhat taken aback, she pulled herself together and devoted herself with more sincerity and devotion to Swami's service. Her health was slowly deteriorating. Kith and kin of her natal home took her to the village to look after her, but she could scarcely endure separation from her beloved Swami and returned very soon to Puttaparthi to do as much service as possible despite her poor and deteriorating health. Time passed. Some devotees came to Puttaparthi to invite Swami to their place. Before leaving Puttaparthi, Swami promised Subama that at the time of her demise, he would make it a point to reach her and place holy Ganga waters in her mouth. Soon thereafter, Subama passed away. Some of the villagers recalled Swami's promise and talked about it mockingly, that Swami did not keep his promise of offering holy water to Subama before her death. At that moment, Bhagawan was among his devotees in a far-off place near Tripadi. He set out for Puttaparthi, telling them that he had to go to Puttaparthi urgently. On his arrival, he was informed that Subama had breathed her last several hours. He found Subhama's body already with ants crawling all over. He announced, "Subhama is not dead, she is still alive." But those around insisted that she'd stopped breathing long ago, that she indeed died, but that they were nevertheless keeping the body only for Swami's arrival. But Swami reiterated that Subhama was still alive. He came close to her and called out, "Look, Subhama, I am your Swami, I have come." And to the consternation of everybody around, Subhama opened her eyes wide. Tears trickled out of her eyes. The onlookers were dumbstruck. Swami tenderly touched her lips with his fingers, and the cool waters of the celestial Ganga flowed out of his divine fingers into the parched lips. She lapped them up and swallowed. Her face was aglow with indescribable satisfaction and happiness. She touched Swami's hands softly as she closed her eyes for the last time. Swami knows perfectly the exact moment of everyone's death. Creation, maintenance, and ultimate dissolution are within Swami's absolute control. That is why he is God himself. Creation, maintenance, and dissolution are in my hand. Swami was once conversing with his devotees in an interview room. He showed them his palm and asked what was there in it. Somebody answered that there was nothing there, but Baba said in all serenity, "This empty hand holds everything." When he closed it and opened it, a moment later, there was a locust there. Wonder of wonders, there was also a tiny leaf to serve as the insect's food. The locust was actually feeding on it. In a little while, Swami closed his fist and opened it to reveal there was nothing there. The devotees present in the room could not believe their eyes. Through this incident, Swami revealed to all of us, ignorant as we are, that creation, maintenance, and dissolution lie in his control. This incident took place about 30 years ago. Bhagawan explains his divinity in a few pregnant words. He declared, "Bard knows creation, God knows." Through this incident, Swami knows ultimate dissolution. He who embodies the three supreme powers is Bhagawan. Herein lies the sublime secret of my essentiality. Om Shri Sathya Sai Prabhane Namaha. Om Shanti.
Chapter 8. The Lord of the Cosmos. This play is his, the role is his, the lines are written by him. He directs, he designs the dress and decoration, the gesture and the tone, the entrance and exit. You have to act the part and receive his approbation when the curtain falls. Baba. All elements in his control. The 5 elements, Panchabhutas, earth, water, light, air, and space, are in the total control of Sri Sathya Sai Baba. We will be able to appreciate the veracity of this statement from a few incidents. Rescue from fire. One day, Baba developed a high temperature all of a sudden. It was 104.5 degrees Fahrenheit. Devotees were all perturbed, but happily for them, the temperature came down to 99 degrees Fahrenheit within 5 minutes or so. None of those around him could understand why the temperature rose so abruptly and also came down equally quickly. At about 9:30 p.m., an open-air dinner was arranged on the roof of Swami's residence. The night was cool and pleasant, and there was beautiful moonlight. As everyone was enjoying the meal in the fine atmosphere and prevailing merriment, Baba turned to a devotee and said, "When you return home tomorrow, caution your mother to be very careful with fire. At the same time, assure her that I will always be with her and protect her from every hazard." Everyone was somewhat taken aback by Baba's words. What made him talk of fire and future hazards? They pressed Baba to let them know what the matter was. Swami explained. His mother was praying in her puja room. A number of lighted oil lamps were around her. As she was offering prayers, her sari caught fire without her noticing it. I had to go to help her and put out the flames. Some devotees obtained Swami's permission to make a trunk call to the lady to find out how she was doing. The lady herself answered their call and confirmed the incident. Swami too spoke to her and consoled her, mentioning that it was he who had doused the flames out of compassion for her. But the lady, devout as she was, anxiously inquired, "Swami, while trying to save me, have you burnt your own hands?" He reassured her sweetly, "No, not at all. The flames caused me no harm. Only my temperature went up a little, but soon subsided. Do not worry." Rescue from flood. During the day when Baba stayed in the old temple, once there were floods in the river Chitravati. The level of the flood waters rose steadily, and soon it reached the temple and surrounded it. The situation was quite grim, as the water threatened to enter the temple in a few minutes and inundate everything. At that moment, Baba walked into the waters and said, "That's enough, go back now." Suddenly the flood began to recede. As described earlier, when for the first time the week-long Veda Purusha Sapta Gnana Yagnam was performed, devotees thronged the Prashanti Nilayam in thousands. Just when the valedictory offering, Purna Ahuti to Agni, the fire god, was about to commence, the sky became overcast. Massive dark clouds, coupled with thunder and lightning, threatened to bring about a heavy downpour. The present-day auditorium had not been yet built then, and the vast gathering assembled under the roof, open sky, had no shelter whatsoever. If it rained, the whole program would have to come to a standstill. People were growing restless at the disturbing prospect. Noticing their anxiety, Baba assured them, "Don't worry, there will be no rain." In a little while, the dark clouds cleared. The Purna Ahuti went on as scheduled and was duly completed without a hitch. Water turns into petrol. Once, when Baba was going to Bangalore by car, a little ahead of the town of Shiklabalapur, the vehicle stalled as the petrol ran out. There was no filling station anywhere near. Baba asked for water to be brought from the nearby pond. When it was brought in a container, he dipped his hand in the water and stirred it a little. He then asked the driver to fill the petrol tank with the water so treated. The engine sparked to life and the journey was completed without a problem. On another similar occasion, Baba, accompanied by a group of devotees, visited Aurangabad and Ellore in Maharashtra and was proceeding by car to Hyderabad in Andhra Pradesh. On the way, the car stopped for want of fuel. At that time, petrol dealers were on a statewide agitation and went on strike, and there was no way to replenish the tank. Bhagawan just ordered the car, "Run." It started to run. After reaching Hyderabad, Baba told Shri Kasturi, without a single drop of fuel, we had to cover 150 miles. What to talk of petrol? Not even water was available on the way this time to fill the fuel tank. We saw no stream nor pond on the route we travelled by. Sunshine in the Himalayas. We have already read earlier that in June 1961, Bhagawan took his parents and some devotees on a pilgrimage to the holy shrine of Badrinath. Sri Urugulu Ramakrishna Rao, the then governor of Uttar Pradesh, also joined the entourage and saw to it that every facility was provided to the pilgrims. The trip from Rishikesh to Badrinath, situated in the higher reaches of the Himalayas, where snowfalls are common, and back to Rishikesh was completed in just 7 days. All through that period, the travellers encountered not a single snowfall. On the other hand, there was welcome sunshine. The hospitable sun made the weather comfortable and enjoyable. Local inhabitants noticed this unusual weather and felt happy. The phenomenon was also observed by a number of holy persons engaged in spiritual pursuits at those lonely and inhospitable heights. They guessed, quite correctly, that a highly distinguished spiritual person must be visiting the region and causing by his presence such agreeable, though unseasonal weather. A devotee questioned Bhagawan, Swami, you eat very little. Your body comprises the 5 elements, Panchabhutas. Then from where does it derive its potency? Baba gave a very pithy reply. The 5 elements give me no potency. It is I who gives them their potency. Om Shri Sathya Sai Parabrahmanaya Namaha. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. End of chapter 8.
Shri Sathya Sai Shri Sathya Sai Atmadoli Kalonu Anandadayi Shri Sathya Sai Atmadoli Kalonu Anandadayi Shri Sathya Sai Manasa Sarovaramu Pakadali Kaga Manasa Sarovaramu Pakadali Kaga Sesharupa Kanadi Kalpamurani Dachi Shastrama Madhura Ganamu Cheyuvedanu Na Tanuvella Haiga Viharinpu Maiya Tanuvella Haiga Viharinpu Maiya Uyalanu Guma Shri Sathya Sai Brahmandamandayu Yapilchiguna Brahmandamandayu Yapilchiguna Nive Munalo Ninachiyunavu Vishwamandayu Nilopalaidugana Vasudeva Vasudeva Nenu Sai Deva Nenu Niyonu Nanuga Uyala Ruguma Shri Sathya Sai Atmaroli Karunu Anandadayi
Chapter 9. Chapter 9. Why fear when I'm here? God is neither distant nor distinct from you, Baba. During the time when Sri Kasturi took up permanent residence in Prashanti Nilayam, Swami used to visit the homes of residents who were then only a few. Thus, those residents could often share the blissful company of Bhagawan. During one such visit to Kasturi's home, Swami asked Srimati Kasturi to sing a song. She sang a Kannada song composed by herself. My Father Sai, I have come to you in the fullest faith that you will protect me. Please do not let go of my hand. After she finished, Swami replied to her with his own song composed in Tamil, which was her mother tongue. Why fear? Even before you ask, Sai Baba showers boons. Even before you pray, he runs to you to give protection. How sweet, how simple, and how captivating is God's wonderful answer to his devotees' prayer. This answer is meant not merely to that lady, Srimati Kasturi. It is most certainly addressed to each and every single person in the wide world who is afflicted, distressed, and suffering. More than that, it is addressed to everyone in the entire universe. Child saved from a truck. The following incident happened in 1955. Residential quarters for devotees were coming up around Swami's residence in Prashanti Nilayam. Shankar, an 11-year-old boy, was actively participating in the construction activity. A truck loaded with bricks arrived and the boy was helping in unloading them. After the truck was emptied, he stood at its rear, shaking dust off his body and clothes. He did not notice that the driver started the engine and the vehicle was moving backwards. The driver, unfortunately, did not see Shankar and drove the truck very fast. To his utter shock, the boy suddenly found himself pushed violently by the huge vehicle. Petrified with fear and shock, he lost all bodily control and just collapsed where he stood. The inexorable did come to pass. The heavy tire of the enormous vehicle crushed his tender leg. The only thing Shankar could do in that awful moment before he became unconscious was to give out a loud cry, "Swami!" People nearby ran to his rescue, pulled him aside and wrapped a towel around the crushed limb. Totally confused, they did not know what to do next. They could only raise their heads and look towards Swami's residence. To their surprise, they saw Swami standing in the balcony and looking directly in their direction. Before they opened their mouths to tell him what had happened, Swami told them to take the boy to the hospital adjoining his residence. They did as directed. Afterwards, Shankar's brother ran to Swami. He loudly wailed, "Swami, my younger brother has lost his leg." Swami consoled him, "Do not worry. Nothing has happened to his leg." As he uttered sweet words, he pulled back the sleeve of his shirt and showed his open palm. On the palm could be distinctly seen the marks of the truck's heavy tire. Swami told the distraught young man that he had inserted his own palm between the truck's tire and the little boy's leg, so that the huge weight of the truck would not bear heavily upon the leg. When doctors found that not a single bone of Shankar's leg was damaged, they were astonished and also very much relieved. Due to Swami's divine will and immense mercy, the boy recovered soon. A similar incident happened in 1999. In January 1999, The sports day was being celebrated in the Hillview Stadium in Prasanthi Nilayam. Despite Swami's suggestion not to be adventurous, the students were displaying adventurous gymnastic skills. It was now the turn of an acrobatic event in gymnastics, in which students were participating in somersault on a truck. Nobody noticed that the nuts and bolts of the iron bars arranged for the event got loosened. Children had completed their event successfully and there was a huge applause. But at the end, Swami did not join the students to pose for a photograph, which he normally does. Instead, he went back to Purnachandra Hall, where he resides. He showed his body to Indulal Shah and to some of the students there. There was blood all over. Swami was bleeding profusely. Everyone was astonished and worried. I lied below the truck and saved the students. Now I have to wash the blood. The kids were requesting me to join them and pose for the photograph. Poor kids, they do not know, Swami said in his usual calm and compassionate voice. God is closer than husband. Kumar was a student in the Sathya Sai College in Puttaparthi. Swami allotted his parents ground floor accommodation in the Eastern Bloc close to his own residence. At the evening prayer one day, Kumar sang a bhajan, Sai Pita or Mata Sai. Sai is the father and Sai is the mother. As Swami sat on his throne quite close by and nodded his head in tune with the song, Swami's eyes were swimming with kindness and compassion. No sooner than the first stanza of the song ended, Swami abruptly got up and hurried out. The boy felt that his singing was not probably to Swami's liking. Swami walked into the residence of Kumar's parents. Devotees who watched the scene were surprised. In recent times, no one had seen Swami thus leave his residence and proceed beyond its precincts. In the residence of Kumar's parents, his mother had a heart attack and was struggling for life. Baba hastened into the house, gave her a glass of water, and materialized vibhuti for her. After a few words of solace and encouragement to the lady, he returned to the bhajan hall and resumed his throne. Just then, Kumar's bhajan song was coming to a close. When it was over, Swami spoke to Kumar. Do you know why I hurried out? Your mother was on the verge of dying, and I went to save her. Here you were singing, you are the father, you are the mother. How could I sit here enjoying your song when your mother was in agony there? I had to reach her urgently and save her. The lady's husband was all the time present in the bhajan hall among the devotees. His son too was there singing. All the same, only God could rescue the suffering lady. God undoubtedly is the closest and the most intimate of one's kith and kin, closer than even husband.
God is closer than mother. Swami was to give a discourse in the SAP Kalyana Mandapam marriage hall in Madras, now known as Chennai. Thousands of eager devotees gathered to have his darshan and to hear his inspiring words. His divine form filled them with bliss. After darshan, Swami spoke in Telugu. Chitor Nagaya, the celebrated actor and devotee of Swami, was standing by Swami and translating his discourse into Tamil. The audience was spellbound. They were imbibing the honey-sweet speech, avidly savouring every drop of it. They forgot themselves in happiness at hearing the divine words of their beloved Bhagawan. Suddenly, a small baby, barely a year old, and lying in his mother's lap, began to wail loudly. The audience was distracted. The engrossing spell of bliss was ruined. All eyes turned towards the crying baby, who was the cause of the disturbance. A few seconds passed. Everyone saw Swami on the dais, gently smiling. He extended his open palm towards the crying child in the abhaya mode, a gesture denoting assurance of protection, but suddenly closed it into a tight fist. That very moment, the child fell silent. None could gauge the reason why the baby suddenly started wailing and why he equally suddenly stopped crying. Swami extended the closed fist now towards Nagaya, opened it and said, a small 25 paise coin got stuck in the little baby's throat and I have removed it. Here it is. Sri Nagaya was completely overcome by emotions of surprise and happiness and immediately announced it over the microphone. The enraptured audience exploded into wild applause. Even though the little baby was right in her own lap, the poor mother did not know what had gone wrong with her child. It is obvious that more than even one's own mother, God is very much closer. Suicide averted. A young man was employed as an accountant in a firm in Calcutta, known as Kolkata. His mother was Swami's devotee, but he did not share her faith. It so happened that he was accused of misusing the firm's money. Unable to bear the infamy, he even thought of suicide. His mother wrote to Baba requesting his permission to bring her unfortunate son to Puttaparthi, but not knowing how to send it through post to Baba, she kept a letter behind Swami's photograph in her puja place. Meanwhile, the boy went to a bridge on the river Ganges. He thought that death would be easy if he jumped into the river. Just as he was about to do so, he heard a voice, "Come to Puttaparthi, come to Puttaparthi." He was surprised. Puttaparthi, Puttaparthi, the words continued to ring in his ears. Thereupon, he abandoned all thoughts of suicide, went to the railway station, purchased a ticket to Bangalore and boarded a train. Strangely, even the noise made by the running wheels sounded to him like Puttaparthi, Puttaparthi. When the train moved fast, the words sounded fast. When the wheels were slow, the words too were slow. On arrival at Bangalore, he went to the booking counter to purchase a ticket for his onward journey to Penakonda. The man at the counter knew that if any person asked for a ticket to Penakonda, he would most probably be heading for Swami's darshan. So he asked the young man, "Are you going to have Sai Baba's darshan?" When he answered in the affirmative, he was informed that Baba was presently right there in Brindavan, in Whitefield, in Bangalore. The young man stood there somewhat hesitantly, but the words, Puttaparthi, Puttaparthi, once again began ringing in his ears, so he yielded to that call and asked for a ticket to Penakonda. In those days, to reach Puttaparthi from Penakonda, one had to cover several miles on foot. Even as the young man proceeded on the arduous way on foot, the words Puttaparthi, Puttaparthi never ceased to ring in his ears. He finally reached Puttaparthi at 8 p.m. and discovered that just an hour earlier, at 7 p.m., Baba had arrived at Puttaparthi. At that time, summer training classes were about to commence at Brindavan in Bangalore. In spite of that, no one knew why Baba had suddenly returned to Puttaparthi. When devotees inquired on this point, Baba explained, students who would be arriving at Vrindavan for the summer classes have to be fed. I have come here to collect rice and take it to Vrindavan. Next morning, during the public audience, Swami came close to that young man and addressed him, "Hey Kolkata, come in." In the interview room, Baba referred to the accusation against him in his office and told him not to get upset about it. He encouraged him and dissuaded him from putting an end to his life. He also told him to stay in Puttaparthi for 9 days before returning to Calcutta. In due course, the man went back to his job. He was thus saved by Baba in response to his mother's prayers, which she could not even send to him by post. His boundless compassion. Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai was once travelling by car from Bangalore to Puttaparthi. One of his students was driving the vehicle. Other cars with groups of devotees were following Swami's car. The ground was stony and rough, the terrain hilly, desolate and silent. A long crowbar was crossing that path. The student driver of Baba's car noticed it from a distance. He could not, however, make up his mind whether to stop the car to save the cobra or to run over it. He looked back in the rear seat of the car and found Swami in yoga mudra, deep contemplation. He thought, Swami is fast asleep. If the car were to be suddenly brought to a halt, his sleep would be disturbed. Therefore, he sped forward and ran over the cobra. After arriving at Prashanti Nilayam, the student alighted from the driver's seat, ran and opened the rear door for Swami. Swami got down and proceeded towards the veranda of his residence. The student was intrigued to find a wide smear of mud, like a broad strip, on the back of Swami's robe. He said, "Swami, your garments are soiled on the back." Swami's reply was, "A little while ago, I had to go below the car's tire in order to save that poor cobra." Om Shri Sathya Sai Parabrahmane Namaha. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. End of chapter 9.
Chapter 10. The Master of Time. Om Kala Swarupaya Namaha. Past is past. It can't be recalled. Future you are not sure of. The given moment is now present. This present is omnipresent. Baba. Several years ago, a lady called Sakama lived in Prashanti Nilayam. One day, she questioned Baba. "Swami, in the battlefield at Kurukshetra, the Kauravas ranged enormous forces, fully armed and ready to fight. In such a situation, how was it possible for Bhagavan Sri Krishna to recite to Arjuna the Bhagavad Gita, consisting of as many as 700 shlokas? As Sri Krishna took his own time and Arjuna listened, ignoring the enemy's threat, how did the enemy keep quiet?" Swami did not answer her question there and then. That evening, Swami, along with several of his devotees, went as usual to spend time on the sands of river Chitravadi. The devotees sat around Swami. Sakama too was among them. Swami thrust his hand into the sand, and as the curious devotees watched with wide open eyes, he slowly pulled out a foot-long, gleaming white ivory figure. It showed Lord Sri Krishna sitting on a chariot and exhorting Arjuna with Gita. The image was extraordinarily minute in detail and of exquisite craftsmanship. Sakama, in particular, was staring at it with open-mouthed wonder. Swami explained, how many days will ordinary mortals take to carve this beautiful ivory image? How many hands will be required to accomplish this intricate carving? How many artists would be required to make the initial design and to prepare detailed plans? But do you see how it has materialized in all its splendor just in a trice, the moment Swami wills it to be? If God has the will, he can dominate time and control it. What would take several months for man, I have abridged into just a moment. In like manner, it is also possible to elongate time by divine will. On the day I gave the Gita to Arjuna in the battlefield, I created in his mind all the time needed. I also abridged it to a few moments for the rest of the troops on the field. Time is within the complete control of Sri Sathya Sai. He can abridge it and also elongate it at his divine will. He abridges time. Here is an instance where a period of several years was abridged by Swami into just an hour. There was a Christian student in Colombo, Sri Lanka. He came to India for college education and got himself enrolled in the Madras Christian College, Madras, Chennai. One day, he went to the Sri Rama Krishna mission. He was very much attracted by the image of goddess Kali, which Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had worshipped. Gradually, he became a devotee of goddess Kali. He received initiation. He would meditate deep and long on the Devi mantra. Eventually, he reached that stage when he would remain for hours and hours in samadhi, spiritual trance, a state in which the meditator suspends connection between body and soul. Afterwards, he even converted to Hinduism and took to sannyasa, renunciation. Sometime later, he traveled to Colombo to visit his mother. The poor lady moaned in grief on seeing her darling son in the garb of a Hindu sannyasi. She knew that her son would never think of marriage and reconciled herself to it. But she very much desired her son at least to give up his Hindu monk's dress and adopt that of a Christian father. The son declined to do so. He gave up his mother as well as possessions and returned to India, and in due course reached Puttaparthi. Swami invited him into the interview room. An hour passed. Suddenly, there was a loud cry from inside the room. "Oh, mother!" This was so loud that everyone gathered on the veranda outside could hear it. A little later, Swami opened the door of the room and out walked the Shakti devotee, bathed from top to toe in holy vibhuti. What transpired inside the interview room? It seems that after admitting him into the room, Swami materialized a big forest and directed the man to walk into it. The sannyasi just walked and walked and walked endlessly. Without stopping for rest, he walked on and on amidst huge trees for several days. He covered miles and miles and walked for decades and decades. Then suddenly, Swami ordered him, "Stop, turn round and look behind." The sannyasi stopped, turned round, and stood transfixed. What did he see? The same goddess Kali, whom he had so ardently worshipped ever since childhood, was standing right in front of him in all splendor. For several years, this sannyasi had been wishing that he should remove himself to remote forests to spend long years in meditation. Swami fulfilled that deep urge within the span of an hour. He had been desiring to perform penance for many, many years. But Swami abridged that also to less than an hour. In addition, Bhagawan vouchsafed him the darshan of Goddess Kali that he had been yearning for. When his most ardent wish was so beautifully fulfilled, the sannyasi could not hold himself back, but cried out in ecstasy, "Oh, Mother!" On hearing this cry, which emerged out of the inner recesses of his heart, Bhagavan responded in melodious voice, "My dear man, there is no need for intense penance in the Kali Yuga. It is sufficient if you remember your favorite deity's name and incessantly intone it mentally. Only through Namasmaran will you attain fulfillment." So saying, Swami materialized copious vibhuti, poured it all over the delighted youngster, and blessed him. He elongates time. We now come to the incident when Bhagavan Sai Baba extended a time span of 30 days to 30 years. Lal Bahadur Shastri was the Prime Minister of India then. His personal assistant was Tyagaraj. When he had some health problem, he went to Bangalore for a medical checkup. After thoroughly examining him, doctors diagnosed him as a cancer patient and declared his life expectancy to be just 3 months. They also told him, "Sir, if you do not mind, we have a suggestion. There is only one remedy for your disease, and that is to pray at the lotus feet of Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba and request him to save you. There is no other way." Dr. S. Bhagavatam, Baba's devotee, is presently right here in this hospital. Swami is coming here tomorrow to visit him. You may avail of this excellent opportunity. But Tyagaraj declined the advice. He added, "I am the personal assistant to the Prime Minister of India. I do not need to fall at the feet of any Baba. I can afford to get proper medical treatment anywhere." He followed his own counsel and went here and there for medical help. After 2 months, he returned to the same hospital and got himself examined once again. Sure enough, doctors declared that he would live only for another month or so. Thyagaraja was now in a desperate hurry to reach Puttaparthi. As he waited for darshan, Swami approached him and said, "Cancer?" Poor Thyagaraja burst into tears and fell at Swami's lotus feet. Swami materialized vibhuti, placed it in his hand, and told him to eat it. This was done for 3 consecutive days. On the 3rd day, Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai said, "Cancer is cancelled." Needless to add, subsequent medical tests confirmed no trace of cancer on Thyagaraja. This incident happened 30 years ago. Thyagaraja served in the office of Sanatana Sarathi in Prashanti Nilayam until recently. Presently, he is doing service in the canteen in Prashanti Nilayam, savouring the unbounded benevolence of Swami. The extraordinary case of Thyagaraja demonstrates Bhagavan Sai's divine power of elongating a 30-day period to a long span of 30 years. Time, kala, is totally in Bhagavan's control and command. That is why in the Sathya Sai Ashwatara Sahasranama Valli, the 1008 attributes and names by which he is worshipped ritualistically, we find him addressed as Kalaya Namaha, Kala Kalaya Namaha, Kalantakaya Namaha, Kala Swarupaya Namaha. Salutations to him who is time, who regulates time, who destroys time, who is the very embodiment of time.
Time and space bind me not. Baba was once on a visit to Venkatagiri and was about to return to Puttaparthi. An old lady, an ordinary resident of Prashanti Nilayam, was at that time in her native village by the name of Vayalpadu, situated on the Venkatagiri Puttaparthi road. So she thought she would pray to Swami to break the journey at Vayalpadu and visit her home. She ascertained the day of Swami's departure from Venkatagiri. On that day, she stood by the road waiting patiently for Swami's car. She also persuaded other villagers to keep day and night vigil at that spot. But the car made no appearance. She came to know that Swami had meanwhile reached Prashanti Nilayam. Deeply disappointed, she too returned to Puttaparthi. She found Swami on the veranda of his upper floor residence, talking to some persons on the ground. She pushed herself forward and without stopping for breath, asked loudly, "Swami, our villagers and I stood on the wayside near Vayalpadu waiting for you. We kept day and night vigil. When did your car pass by our village? How did you arrive here?" Amused at her excited manner, Baba burst into laughter. Everybody was looking up at Swami, but suddenly they heard his laughter just by their side. Swami was standing by their side, still laughing. There was no Swami in the veranda high above. No one could understand how and when Swami came down. No one could understand how and when Swami came down from the upper floor to the ground. Swami told the old lady, "Look, you have seen how I've come down from the upper floor to the ground below. If I can do this, could I not, together with my car, arrived right here by your village unseen by any of you. Aneka Rupaya, assuming numerous forms. Baba was in Kodaikanal with his devotees. Suddenly he jumped out of his bed and stood and shouted, "Don't fire!" As he said so, he fell on the bed. The body stiffened. Apparently, he had left his physical body. After an hour or so, the body moved. Baba opened his eyes. He dictated an address in Bhopal and directed that an express telegram be sent there stating, "Don't worry, the revolver is with me, Baba." Swami Satchidananda pleaded, "Swami, the post office staff will not accept a telegram if we mention the word revolver in the message. If we change it to instrument, they will not object." Swami agreed and the modified telegram was duly dispatched. But the devotees could not make head or tail of this mysterious incident. A letter arrived from Bhopal 4 days later. Baba gave it to the devotees. On reading it, they were filled with surprise as well as happiness. What has exactly happened? There was a military officer in Bhopal who had served in the Second World War and distinguished himself. Despite this, he was not given due position in the statewide development programs underway because freshers were being preferred to old hands. Frustrated, he developed utter distaste for life. Added to this, his wife happened to be away in her parental home. There was no one who could console him and give him wise counsel and then get him out of his depression. Under these circumstances, he decided to commit suicide. He test-fired his revolver to see whether it was functioning all right. It performed well. He readied it to kill himself with the second shot. Just as he was about to press the trigger, there, in far-off Kodaikanal, Swami suddenly shouted, "Don't fire!" At that precise moment, in Bhopal, the door of the officer's room suddenly flew open. Standing at the door was his bosom friend, an old college mate. He did not come alone. His wife too was with him. Behind him was their porter, who was carrying their luggage. As soon as the officer saw them, he ran into his inner room and hid the revolver somewhere. He came out smiling to welcome the guests. The guest amused his old friend officer with cheerful conversation. He recalled several happy events in their college life. He revived pleasant memories of the carefree company they shared while in college many long years ago. He was quite vocal and entertaining. The lady also joined in and added to their joviality. The warmth and friendliness of the visitors soon drove away the officer's misery and restored his mental equanimity. Visitors soon noticed that the officer's wife was away, so they said they wished to go to another friend's house. They also incidentally mentioned the other friend's address where they were planning to proceed. The officer tried to persuade them to stay on, but they excused themselves, promising to come and stay on their next visit to Bhopal. They took leave of the officer. The officer now searched for the revolver hurriedly hidden a little while earlier. It was not found despite a thorough search. Suddenly, he remembered Sathya Sai Baba. Some time back, he had gone to Puttaparthi and had Swami's darshan. His wife was a devout follower of Baba, so he concluded that this was all Baba's Leela. Locking up his house, he went in search of his college fellow at the address given to him, but he was told that no visitor had come there. Just as he returned to his home, an express telegram from Kodaikanal arrived. It read, "Don't worry, the instrument is with me, Baba." On reading it, the officer was overcome with remorse. To express his gratitude, he wrote a detailed letter to Bhagawan. It is through that letter that Baba's devotee also learned about his full details of the incident. It is worthy to note that to see the devotee, one assumed three human forms: the officer's friend and his wife and the porter, all of them simultaneously at the same spot and at the same time, which makes it an extraordinary event with profound significance. It also establishes yet again that time is under Swami's control. This is the main meaning of the Vedic dictum, Ekoham Bahusyam, the one will to manifest into many.
The incomprehensible. It happened around 1988. There were about 1,400 students in the hostel of Swami's College in Vrindavan at Whitefield near Bangalore. Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai visited the hostel one night. The delighted students respectfully stood in his presence. Suddenly the electricity went off. In the darkness, Swami moved quietly towards a boy and whispered to him in his ears, "Atul, I will give you something. Hold your hand." The boy extended his open hand and Swami placed a laddu in it. He further whispered to the boy, "Don't show it to anybody. Put your hand behind you." Suddenly the electricity was restored. Bulbs came back to life. Atul looked around. Surprisingly, all the 1,400 boys assembled there were keeping their hands behind them. Everyone was having a laddu in his hand. That is Swami. We get astonished at the amazing leelas. Our reasoning powers abandon us. Tongue fails us. Mind refuses to function. Nothing can be understood. How can we comment upon, much less explain, such displays of Swami's divine sport? That is why it said, Yato vacho nivarate aprapya manasa saha, meaning that the universal absolute cannot be reached or comprehended by the bodily senses or by mind. He arrives unnoticed. Mudnahalli is a small town that is located on a way on the roadside from Puttaparthi to Bangalore. There is a Swami school there. In February 1993, the school was to celebrate its anniversary. Teachers and students invited Swami to grace the occasion, and Swami gave his consent. But on the given day, he did not come, even though the expectant teachers, students, and invitees waited and waited long for him. The cultural programs, children's dance, and other items were gone through without Swami's presence. In due course, even as everyone waited eagerly for Swami's arrival, the entire program was over. There was a cloud of disappointment casting a dark shadow of celebration. Later, the photographs taken on the occasion were developed and printed. To everybody's astonishment, one of the photographs taken during the dance item showed Swami standing among the dancing children. Not only that, Swami was seen in that picture not at one single place, but at 5 different places, wearing different dress at each place. Om Shri Sathya Sai Parabrahmane Namaha. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. End of chapter 10.
Swami आरती